Okay, hello, Red Nail Energy listeners. This is Mikhail, and I'm so excited to be recording my first male guest. So,
Hey,
welcome to the podcast, Niko. A little bio about Niko. Niko Arapkiles is a multi-talented content creator and coach known for his dedication to personal development and motivating others to unlock their full potential. With a passion for empowering individuals through mindset and fitness, Niko inspires a community of followers on Instagram and beyond, where he shares his journey and encourages others to take charge of their own lives. So,
hey.
welcome to the pod. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure getting to sit down and have some good convo.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best part, I think, about all of this is just connecting with other people and expanding via their mindset and what they've learned works and doesn't work. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and hear some of the things you've learned along the way. I'd love just to give the audience a little background. So if you want to jump in and kind of share a little bit about what got you to where you are today, and then we will just keep the conversation going.
Cool. Sounds great to me. Yeah, I'd say always kind of a good place to start whenever I share my story is come back to my baseball career. I played baseball all the way through college, and I was really fortunate and blessed to play with some really talented, talented teammates and players and teams and all sorts of stuff. And had my ups and downs with it, had a lot of wins and successes, had a lot of challenges. And I was actually just on a call right before this, and I was sharing a little bit of my story. And honestly, it kind of came from when I really reflect, and this is something I didn't think I would like really share much at all, but it's just the more I tap into who I am and just honoring myself and just being truly authentic to every single aspect and part of me, that's when it continues to unlock new levels for me. But really, it probably came from like a really painful place because although I was becoming a very talented player, I was always dedicated myself, putting a lot of mental focus, a lot of mindset work, and then also the physical work. It was my senior year of high school, and I really tailspinned the pressure because our team was really good. We ended up winning the state title that year, fortunately. But I kind of mentally imploded that year, and it was just really tough. And it was really honestly like embarrassing because I was highly touted to be one of the better players on the team in the state, and it just was anything but that. But fortunately, like I realized how powerful the mind is. That's what it really taught me, is that like our mind can either take us down to the lowest of lows, but it also can take us up to the high highs. And I essentially experienced pieces of that throughout college as well, as where I really started tapping into my mind. And I went to a junior college first because I still wanted to go play D1. And so my last year in JUCO, I had basically had one season to kind of figure it out and play lights out and get someone to come recruit me. And so I just tapped into everything I had. My mom gave me a copy of The Secret, and that really just continued to stick with me. And then I started implementing, like visualizing. I'd see myself hitting walk-off home runs off the 7 of the scoreboard, like that specific and detailed. And most importantly, I would feel it. Right. So I'm big on like the energetics of everything. And so yeah, that kind of stuff would start happening, and it was just like unexplainable. Like no one ever did that kind of stuff. And it just kind of showed me like what was possible. And then I started applying that stuff to my business career. I started working, doing stuff like affiliate marketing. I created my own agencies. Then I started working with like really big brands that used to be my idols, and all of a sudden I'm hanging out with them. And it was just kind of a surreal experience. And when you continue to stack all these experiences that like, hey, I saw this in my mind first, and then it came to real life, it's like, it's kind of hard to dispute it after you see it so many times. You're like, this isn't just a luck or coincidence. After a while, you're like, I intentionally created this. And it's hard to like go back. You can't unsee and unexperience what you saw and experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. Take me back a little bit to that kind of tailspin and what that felt like to be in. Maybe for listeners that are in a similar spot, I think that it's really helpful to hear when somebody is maybe across the river and you're on the other side, just staring, figuring out what are those tiny stepping stones that you have to place. I mean, where were you at when you were at that kind of rock bottom, and what did it feel like?
Man, I don't even want to go back there.
Well,
But
that's
I
good because
appreciate,
then we get to get across the river together and give people hope. I
yeah,
mean,
no, I appreciate you asking. I think you're exactly right. It's very important because like there's so many people that are currently in that situation. And I feel like at the same note is like you're never done with that situation either. I truly believe that life is just a continuous wave. And the one thing we know about life is that the good times and the bad times are both coming back.
Mhm.
Right. So just because I overcame that aspect to a degree, like it doesn't mean that I didn't face gut wrenching challenges after that. You know,
Right.
you just start learning how to handle them better and more efficiently, and not as doesn't take as long for me to process and go through things as much anymore. But to answer your question or come back to that point, I mean, yeah, it was really, really challenging because like my junior year, so our sophomore year, we did really well. We were not even like projected to do very well. We were a bunch of like freshmen and sophomores, and then we had one senior that was a really good player, and he just led us. And somehow we made it to the state championship game, and we ended up getting second. But I mean, it was ridiculous, like kind of ridiculous that we made it that far playing against this. Like it was really cool. And so like that set the standard.
Mhm.
Right? It's like, okay, we're a highly we're an impressive team, and we've got 2 more years to do this. So it was like there was pressure to be like, all right, we're doing this. And then we did it the next year, where we got to the state title again. And I felt there was a phase during my junior year where I just felt so calm and so relaxed. And it was like I wasn't even thinking. And it was just such a beautiful time. And then all of a sudden, like something happened where I was like wasn't playing. I didn't get very good sleep, and then I just had a bad game, and I was making these errors, and then that just like so I
Snowball.
think that kind of like stuck in me for a little bit. And then my senior year was like even worse because like that was the year like we hadn't won a title yet, and we're like this has been the mission since we started. Like it's this year, it's not happening. So that pressure was continuing to come on, and then I actually even switched positions as well, so it was just a little bit different. And yeah, so I just think that the pressure was really building, and I was playing second base, and it was like we lived in Colorado, so the weather was a little bit colder, especially in the early season. And there was just like it was one of the earliest games, and I was like just warming up, throwing into first base, and all of a sudden, like I got so tense, and like I was like holding the ball with such a tight grip that all of a sudden, like I just like wasn't throwing it very well. I was like I overthrew the first baseman one time, and then that already all of a sudden started getting in my head. And then the next one, I like overcorrected and I like threw it in the dirt. And then it was just like, then I'm like, oh man. And then my mind just like, and I just keep thinking about it and keep thinking about it. The emotions are there. And it's just like, all of a sudden I couldn't throw. It was
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, it's so interesting, as you said, kind of how tied our mind is to that body connection. Your story right now is making me think so much about Simone Biles and that experience of kind of getting the twisties in the Olympics and having this snowball domino effect where arguably the greatest gymnast in history is unable to do the most basic, simple moves that previously she could do in her sleep. And when our mind comes into play, whether for our greatest good or for our detriment, it's pretty incredible how much it can impact our physical body, our health, inflammation, some of these autoimmune diseases, all these chronic illnesses. And then our performance comes into play where it all starts with often like one thought that is just telling us that we're not good enough or that we're, whatever it may be, and it just snowballs. um so what then, your mom gave you the secret, you noted, was that kind of the catalyst to sort of make a turn, or when did you recognize how mental that physical expression was?
So you cut out just a little bit, and but the question was, when did I realize how powerful the mind is? Is that what
Yeah,
I
and
was
kind
getting
of
at?
what was the catalyst for making that change, or for changing it from being a negative domino effect to then getting onto the visualization of throwing the best pitch, or all of those things, kind of what took that turn?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to answer it is when I got myself into a situation where there was no other options but to just Like I had to,
Mhm.
because like my even like years after that, like I went to a junior college. It wasn't exactly the junior college I wanted to go to, but I was making the best of it. And then even my freshman year, I actually decided to get redshirted because I wasn't going to play that much. And then the second year, I still didn't like play amazing. And so then I have 1 year to like, again, play lights out. And I got suspended for the first 4 games with a couple other friends, which is a whole nother story in itself. But I basically had a couple months to like play lights out and figure out how to get some colleges to pay attention to me to go play my childhood dream of Division I baseball. And so there was just no room for any error mentally, right? And so I had to just focus. And I think that's what, when your back is against the wall, it forces you to focus, which I think is a really powerful lesson, because it's like where attention goes, energy flows. And so I was simply focusing on what I needed to do, who I needed to become, how the player that I had to evolve into. And I started seeing myself as a Division I baseball player, because that's all I could afford to do. If I started slipping, oh, what if I strike out? Like it's not going to end well. So it's like how slippery our mind is, how slippery our thoughts are. When you truly understand that, then you start realizing like I can't afford not, like, even these are small little nuances, but it's like I'm pretty intentional about what I put in my mind, specifically right before I go to bed. So even the other night, I was considering watching a movie with my roommate, but he was watching something that I just like didn't really resonate with. And I was like, I think I'm just going to go to bed, because I don't want to put that in my mind before I go to bed and let that like seep in. And so, I mean, that's why we've created tools within our company that actually help us continue to program our mind, but just understanding how programmable our minds are. And it's all based on repetition. So the more that you can visualize, and that's what, I would see it, because I did it one time, I did it every single night. And I would most importantly feel it. I would feel I hit a home run. I got chills, like crack of the bat, just running around the bases, seeing the crowd going wild, like every little detail right off the 7, like getting so excited about it that I felt it. And it was real in my mind. There was even some other experiences later in my college career where I went through a little bit of a slump, and then I just went right back to my practice. And then, I went from going like 0 for 20 with like 9 strikeouts. And then my coach is like, hey, get it together or else you're going to be on the bench. And then all of a sudden the next game, I just play lights out. And then my teammates are like, oh my gosh, that was incredible. Like I went like 6 for 6 with a walk-off hit, and people were, that's amazing. And then it was interesting because I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. But like, I literally knew it was coming. And it was because like I went 200 for 200 last night. Like it just became a part of me. And it's just that, I guess I tell all that to I tell that to share my perspective on the fact that how programmable our minds are. And it's all based on repetition. Because if it's not continually repeated, then it's not really going to work out. So.
And how sneaky social media and technology and algorithms and all those things are, where without us even recognizing it, sometimes we're programming our minds incorrectly, or with things, as you said, with information, with media that is really not conducive. And so I think it's so imperative, even though it's so much easier just to doom scroll, watch the movie, mindlessly do those things, it's so imperative to constantly pause and kind of take inventory of what that environment looks like within our minds, and how we can maybe clean it up a little bit or make small changes, even just to ensure that those thoughts are actually serving us, versus creating this whole story in our heads that's, again, creating these outcomes we don't even want.
Yeah, 100%. And so I guess a few things that I'd love to add to that is, with our company, we talk about the woo and the do, because it's like all this stuff is pretty damn woo. It works for sure, 100%. But it's interesting. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs, so they're always like, all right, well, like, what are we doing though?
Right.
So, and I 100% agree. Like,
Mhm.
that's been my career, is like, because even you look at it with baseball, it wasn't just that I imagined it. I was working my ass off after games and working on my skills and working on inside pitches and outside pitches. So there's always an aspect of woo and do. But I mean, we could argue that 90% is the woo. But
Mhm.
anyways, the aspects of woo is what we'll always talk about. This, basically the pillars that we teach in our company is it's the subconscious blocks. So we all have those. It's about like identifying them, becoming aware of what those, so you can start like relieving those. So what I always talk about is like getting the sandbags off of the hot air balloon, so then you can
Mhm.
just like naturally rise. So that
Mhm.
comes from awareness, right? A lot of people don't even realize the fact that they're scrolling or what they're doing. And so it's important to do that, is like relieve those subconscious blocks. Two, it's about really clarifying what is your vision and how do you see yourself moving forward? And that's where visualization comes in. But it's so important to like constantly refine that vision. And we have a really powerful tool called Vision Espresso. It's like a custom audio from your future self, and then you listen to that every night before you go to bed. So it's like we always have our clients basically remake one every quarter, because it's like you recommit to that vision. And when you're clear on where you're going, you know where you're going, then you don't fall into the doom scrolling as much. You still
Mhm.
can, because like some incredibly smart people built these platforms very
Mhm.
and that's a whole conversation itself. um and then I'll kind of just skip forward, because we have basically 5 pillars. But like one other thing that we do is on the do side is like we have systems, right? And so are you familiar with like KPI
Mhm.
systems within business, right? So we took that concept, but we turned it into like personal development KPIs. And something I've realized that how profound and powerful this is for so many people, because like you were saying, is like we go doom scroll or do stuff that like takes us off of our path. And it comes from like being clear on that vision and like getting aware of what are those things that are blocking you. But then it's like just be simply becoming aware of what is your behaviors. Because for me too, like I still have challenges with social media, 100%.
Mhm.
I'm actively working on that. But what I've found, this is interesting, we have these like KPI sheets. I get nerdy with this, and we're going to eventually build out an app with it all. But basically, one of the biggest things that we track is what we call our anchors. And so we help you identify what those are. But it's like, for me, it's social media, it's staying up late, a couple other things. And then whenever that does happen, because it will happen. And I
Mhm.
think that this even comes back to your point of like people that are at a challenging point, is like being kind to yourself and not saying like, oh, I'm not perfect because if I scrolled, then I'm doing terrible, right? But it's just, you're human too. And again, these platforms were built by very intelligent people that were designed to get you addicted to them. But it's been interesting, because I've been just tracking all the times that I do all those things, and then I bring more awareness. And then basically the whole thing that we teach is like the concept of set points. Like, let's just say that one of your things is doom scrolling, and you
Mhm.
did that like 15 days of the month. Okay, now we have awareness around that. What's the next goal to get us to start weaning ourselves off of that? Can you think
Mhm.
we could do 10, maybe 12, maybe only 12 times this month? And then you track that for the next month, and you're like, okay, if I hit it 12, then I hit my goal, and then I can move on to 10. And then we've built it out so that it like changes colors based on if you upheld your agreements or not. And then you can look at it from like a very high
Mhm.
level view of like, is it a lot of green or is it a lot of red? And it'll tell you if like you're upholding your agreements. So it's just really powerful, because I used to scroll a lot, and it's getting a lot better now that I just have
Mhm.
more awareness on when that's coming up. So
Yeah, awareness and then really tangible goals. So I think it's not super attainable to just say, I'm never going to get on social media again, especially when it often is positive when it comes to some of the aspects of community and collaboration and reach, but
yeah,
to do something more attainable and just say, like, let's just decrease it a little bit. And then I also really love personal KPIs, because even if you are a business owner and it feels personal because you're an entrepreneur or the CEO, we're often doing a lot of measuring of progress and data for this other thing, and we don't turn that mirror to ourselves often. But I think if your personal KPIs are on track, it's only going to like bleed into every other aspect of your life. And so to really get honest with yourself about your company might be doing really, really great, and you could be the unhappiest internally that you've ever been. And when you kind of remove those anchors, which is interesting you use that analogy, because as you were speaking about the direction you're going, I was imagining a ship and how if you're even 1 degree off of the direction you're trying to go, it might not feel very big as you're like plugging along in the ocean. But if you zoom out and you see that you're actually now going toward a completely different country over the next year or over however long you're moving, it's actually a huge roadblock, you know? So I love the kind of anchor analogy, because if you can slowly start figuring out what's holding you back or causing you to move in directions you're not trying to go, your whole vision becomes so much more clear, and you can like break it down to these tiny little steps that get you where you're trying to go.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Is like, what do they even say? Like a similar thing with like a rocket ship. If it's just like 1 degree off, all of a sudden it's going to be in a completely different stratosphere. Right. And so that's why, again, I'll come back to vision all the time. It's so imperative from my perspective, is like because it's like, okay, you have the vision, you're going to the moon, and then you launch, and then, let's say 3 months later, you look up and you're like, oh, damn, we're not on pace. We're not on track to go to the moon. Let's reassess the vision. Boom. But that's constant. It's like having the vision, but then constantly tracking it. And again, it's coming just from a place of awareness. It's not judgment and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so off course. It's just like, no, like, okay, that's the goal. Let's kind of continue to reassess. And I think, again, the question you asked earlier, like bringing yourself back to that pain and just like talking to your audience more so, if anyone is relating to that aspect of it, is that one of the most powerful tools that I can strongly recommend is, again, coming back to this whole concept, is where attention goes, energy flows. Okay, even Einstein did this double slit test. Is very interesting. They basically just scientifically proved that where attention goes, energy flows. So with that being said, is like, I'm nerdy like this because I love numbers, and I love how to like just find like cool ways to solve problems, and then like build out systems to make sure that we stay consistent, because that's the whole point of a system. It keeps consistency, right? And so one of the most powerful tools that I can recommend is keeping what I call a monthly milestone list. And so a lot of people will, and myself included, historically speaking, would, they'd be doing good. They'd be doing, some days would not be so good, but then they would just like keep moving forward and not really like reflect on the good things. And then our brains are so much more focused on the negatives, because we're always programmed for survival, number one. And so we'll over focus on the things that were not so positive. Right. But a practice that has been really powerful for me is keeping a monthly milestone list. So anytime like a big win comes up, or even a small win, like anything, like had a great conversation, got on a cool podcast, maybe I signed a big client, maybe I took a trip, like whatever it is, even listened to a cool podcast or read a cool book, like anything. You write that down and you put that in, you keep coming back to it, you keep on focusing on it. And what I like to do as well, I think one of my favorite questions to ask people is like, what was the last thing that made you belly laugh? Because I'm always very intrigued, like what gets people just like rolling on the ground, just like uncontrollably losing their shit. Like it's just fun to hear, like, and then it like that alone gets me laughing and gets them laughing. And again, where we focus on expands. So, but then what I also love doing in that monthly milestone list is tracking all the times that I'm laughing, when I'm having fun. There was one experience, I've shared it a couple of times. And like I was having a bagel with my dad, and somehow he just like started drooling, and I was just like cracking up. And I put this in my sheet, and every time I go back to it, I'm like, wow, that was hilarious. And it already just like shifts my energy. And then because I focus on that, then it actually brings in more things to laugh about. And then when we're laughing, we're present, we're having fun. And then you're not necessarily thinking about all the negative stuff. You're just focusing on the good stuff, which then inherently brings in more good stuff.
For sure. Oh, I love that. I have a list in my phone that isn't necessarily monthly, but it's just called Good Things Are Always Happening to Me. And it's exactly what you said. It's every time, even it's a tiny little glimmer. It's just something in the day. That the other day mine was that I was in the car wash where my tires were in the track. So you're trapped. and this car behind me didn't put their car in neutral and they almost hit me. And the people behind me were like banging on their wall or on their window, making them put it in park. They finally put it in neutral and almost hit me, but didn't. And I was like, this is a great day. My day would have gone so badly if this car would have hit me. So not getting in a car wreck is a great thing to add to my good things are always happening to me list. And it flipped that perspective too, because I think it's really, really easy to chase the negative thoughts. So the rest of that day, I could have been grumbly and been like, you guys wouldn't believe what happened. I almost got hit in the car wash. And instead I'm like, you guys wouldn't believe what happened. I didn't get hit in the car wash. You know, it's the same situation. And it's just our perspective on it that allows us to maybe have a little more resilience and curiosity and humor, which is, I think, the most important medicine and best thing, you know, to keep with us, which my most recent deep belly laugh, I want to like just make you do because it was so funny. I was with one of my friends and I was like, okay, you tell me the superpower you want, and then I'll tell you the stipulation and you decide if you still want the superpower. So tell me your superpower and then I'll tell you the stipulation.
Flying.
Okay, so you can fly, but every time before you take flight, you have to sit down and you have to consume by eating a king size down comforter. The whole thing.
Okay, I'm probably gonna not do that anymore.
Okay. So we went back and forth and we were coming up with the most ridiculous like stipulations to things, and then eventually just being like, well, I want to be able to teleport or fly or whatever, so I guess I'm doing it. And it was like we just kept going and they kept getting crazier and more ridiculous, and it was so silly, but it was like we were cracking up, like crying, laughing. And it's like just the smallest things, like you said, that then you think back on. And then when I see the word teleport or like someone's flying in a TV show, I'm imagining them like eating a blanket before they're able to do that. And it's just like
they definitely ate a blanket before that. That's guaranteed.
I mean, exactly. They have to. So there's stipulations to everything. There's no free lunch. So
there's rules out here. You can't just be doing it the way you want to.
Exactly. I like it. Awesome. Well, what are some of the roadblocks that you faced in your business specifically? Because I think that this conversation is interesting since you're male, you probably work with a lot of male clients, entrepreneurs. I love that. I love the expansiveness of offering some of this mindset and making it more tangible and digestible to a male audience. But what are some of the kind of limiting beliefs or things you've ran into consistently? And then how do you kind of combat that when it comes to getting people to be open to maybe trying something different?
Well, I guess let me ask you this. I have my thoughts, but with the fact that I'm your first male guest, I would imagine your audience is, and with the name, it's probably quite a feminine audience, right? Yeah, it's interesting too. You know, as we continue to mold and adapt our messaging and everything, things kind of shift, but I am not adverse to having a lot of women around me, and specifically in business. Actually, for a while, like I was coaching majority women. All my one-on-one clients right now are women. So I feel like I have a really unique, cool perspective because coming back to the whole like woo and do conversation is like woo side is much more feminine. It attracts females a lot more. And then the do side is more masculine. And so I've learned from a lot of masculine guys that teach a lot of stuff. I'm here in Scottsdale. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. And then there was a point, it was even like a year ago from now, I decided I wanted to go get mentorship more from like the manifestation spiritual side of things. So I got to like learn a lot and be integrated in that world as well. It was pretty funny. I'd get on these like master classes and they'd get on like, all my sisters here. And one brother.
The honorary brother. I like it.
Yeah, it's funny. So you're asking like, what are the main roadblocks that you see specifically in business?
Yeah, and then I'd say maybe not even in business, just kind of even mindset. And then my question even more being to get beyond the roadblock, like what are some of the ways that you've seen men be successful with this or combat some of the like, I don't want the woo part, I just want the do part. And as you said, it could be 90% woo. Like it's really important to connect with and truly embody. As you said, you can't just visualize closing the deal. You have to feel yourself closing the deal or it's not going to be successful. So what are some of the maybe stepping stones or tools you use to break it down and to get people a little more buy-in, and then I'm sure see tons of success when it comes to mindset?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing that always comes to mind is that I'll always say is that your external world is simply a reflection of what's going on internally. And that's a nice little one-liner. But I think the other thing that's really important, I'm big on definitions and like, what are we optimizing for? Again, coming back to the vision, that's so imperative. And so I love asking people like, well, what is your definition of success? Because if it's just to make a bunch of money, like that's a completely different conversation. We're optimizing for something different.
Mhm.
But what's interesting too, and I think more people are becoming a lot more aware of this type of stuff, is that a lot of people they want to feel better, because a lot of people are like, maybe they're having success, but like emotionally they're like living in anxiety on the daily. And so that's a model that, from my perspective, doesn't last. Like there's only so long you can live like that until your nervous system is absolutely fried, and then good luck with. So I think it's about like really taking care of yourself and getting a calm nervous system, which, for men can be a lot more challenging for them to admit. Even I was on a call yesterday with a prospective client, and he's actually like in his late 50s, and I can just see, I haven't worked with too many people that at that age, but you can see how so much stuff has stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot harder for them to like really acknowledge, like, this is how I'm feeling. I'm not feeling amazing, and I'd like to change that. So it really comes down from, I don't know if this directly answers your question, but it's really about honesty. It's about honesty with where you're truly at. And that's what we'll always take clients through, is like, we always draw the metaphor of like the GPS system. There's two components to a GPS. So you want to know where the coordinate is, that's the vision. But what is the current location?
Mm-hmm.
And let's get real. Let's get honest. What kind of revenue are you driving? How are you feeling on a consistent basis? What are your thoughts throughout the day? What's the first thoughts when you wake up? And just really get really clear. Are you feeling good? Do you have a lot of friends? Do you want friends? Like, just getting a grasp. What's your daily routines like? What do you do when you wake up? What's kind of your nightly routine? How much sleep you getting? Like, getting very clear on what's going on. And then we can be like, okay, this is all the things that are going on. What do we actually want? Like, where do we want to be now?
Mm-hmm.
And so that only comes from a place of like total surrender and authenticity and ownership of where you currently are at, instead of being ego driven, which a lot of males are, because they're like, I got to prove myself. But it's just like, okay, well, I mean, sure. But like, until you're honest with where you're at, and it's not about me, it's not about anybody else, it's about being honest with where you're at. Because as long as you're lying, you're not being truly authentic to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the current location, that's the starting point. And until we're 100% there, then there's no way we can truly get to where you want to go, because you're saying that you're in Florida, but you're actually in Colorado, and we don't even know like what the route is now.
Mm-hmm.
So authenticity is everything for me, and that's how I've built my personal brand. We've started helping people with their personal brands as well, because I truly believe that's one of the best personal development experiences that you could possibly go through. So ultimately, yeah, I think probably the biggest thing right away is just being totally truthful with where you're at, how you're feeling, and then we can start, setting a plan of action. And again, I would say, like, from there, once we have solidified like where you're at, that's when we can start putting a plan together. And again, kind of coming back to like those anchors that I was talking about, if we're hitting like 15 a month, we want to get that down to 12. We call these set points. So it's like, okay, if your thoughts are, and I always kind of like grade things on a 1 to 10 scale just to quantify it, to make it kind of draw it out a little bit more. But let's just say, like, your thoughts, generally speaking, are like a 4 out of 10 on a daily basis. Okay, let's set a goal for our thoughts to be a 5 out of 10 this month. Let's see if we can hit that consistently, and then go up to the next one. And that's the same for anything. So it's just like, once we're clear on the vision, once we're honest with where we're at, now we can set a plan based on set points where we're just increasing a little bit more, getting some strong momentum, getting us feeling good, and we're in a good place. And then that's when we can really start riding that wave of momentum of like just feeling good and kind of getting back into more of a habit schedule where it's like it's starting to come more naturally. But in the beginning, it can feel daunting because you feel stuck.
Yeah. And I think to your point about being at almost a crossroads where you said you didn't have a choice but to change your thoughts, but to work on that mindset. A lot of people find themselves at that point, which is difficult because it's so vulnerable. And relationally, if you're in a situation where somebody that maybe is in more of that prideful, ego driven mindset, to be somebody that's a safe enough space for them to acknowledge and be honest is such a beautiful thing. And then being so careful with that it's not a lot of shame bathed on top of it, but to say like, there's a way out and it's quantifiable and we can put a number to it. And I even think that like the 1 to 10 scale breaks it down in another way, that it's not like I have to go from feeling horrible to feeling amazing, because that feels like jumping across the ocean. But instead, like you said, if we can get really honest about our quality of our thoughts and maybe it's a 4, can we just work on getting them up to a 5 next week or in the next couple weeks? I think that feels so much more doable. And over time, we do get to that 10 out of 10 thought range on a lot of the days. But I feel for a lot of, I do have some male audience that has reached out to me, and it's been really humbling and incredible just to be on that receiving end, that maybe something I've said has resonated with them. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is always providing listeners with things that instill hope rather than like, you're screwed, like you're at a crossroads and you either like do or die. Instead, it's like, there's always a way to improve, even if it's 1%. There's always a way to feel better and to unlock so much potential. But it's often not until you're in that moment where your back is against the wall and it feels like you have no other choice. And then you're kind of willing to do anything, even if it feels woo-woo, you're willing to try the next thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like people, I feel like that's why things are transitioning in the world that we're living in, is because people are just like, the old model isn't working, and they're just like, they were resistant, and I think there obviously still is resistance, but when things get bad enough for long enough, like people are only willing to withstand that type of life for so long before they're like, all right, something has to change. I'll drop my ego. And one other thing I was gonna mention as well, I think this is absolutely imperative, and the thing that will probably humble you the quickest is getting around people that are living in their truth, that are like crushing. Like I know like that's a big thing for me, and I come back to brand a lot. And when I say brand, it's basically building and nurturing relationships at scale. If you're doing online, but it doesn't even have to be online, it can be offline too. It's just like how people view you. But one of the best things with building relationships is that you start getting around other people that are living the life that you want. It'll humble you quick. Because I put together all these men's groups, and we do our podcast events and stuff like that. And I do these little men's dinners sometimes, and I'm hanging out with people that have millions of followers and have made not hundreds, but like tens of millions. And we start talking about stuff, and like it challenges you and it humbles you really quick. Like you think you're all that, and then you hang around people that are a lot further ahead than you, and then are giving you advice and asking you like hard-hitting questions. Like if you're being honest with yourself, it's not comfortable, it's not easy. Even like one of my friends, he went on this passionate rant on like, why am I not creating content at a higher level? And I was like, whoa. So
yeah, that accountability. Yeah,
it's crazy. And so like it's really powerful to be very intentional with the way you build relationships. And again, I just come back to it because I think brand is so important. Not only is it a spiritual development, but then you also get, if you do it intentionally, you start putting people around you that are going to inspire you and uplift you. And one thing I always say too is like, it's really interesting. You heard the phrase of like, you become like the people you surround yourself with, right? But think about this from like, let's say financial, just because it's easy to quantify. But let's say everybody you're hanging out with, let's say you have 5 main friends, they're all making 100 grand a year take home, right? That's your cap. That's your income cap. You cannot go above that, because that you're the average of the people you surround yourself. So the only way for you to increase your income is to add another person in the mix that makes 200 grand, 500 grand, a million, right? And so that's why I'm so diligent about continuing to level up my circles, is because not just the money, but like the relationships that they have, the health that they have, the family lives that they have, the faith that they have. Like I want to continue to get around people that inspire me, because that's my cap at all times.
Right. Absolutely. And I think one of the most expansive parts of that is when you're around people that are maybe further in some aspect than you are. The best part of that is when you do face adversity and struggle and you ask them. It's so rare that they go, oh yeah, all of this happened overnight. There was never any struggle. I snapped my fingers and I just did all of this. It's always, there's no such thing as failure. It's just incomplete success unless you stop. Like you can continue, to see some of those setbacks, kind of commit to those pivots when it feels like your compass is a little bit misaligned. But I find that it's always so motivating to me when I'm having like those harder days to talk to people that are a little bit further ahead or a lot further ahead and have them be like, hey, yeah, me too. Like that you're not, you're not immune to having some of these setbacks. It's not just going to be this perfect linear path. And also, thank goodness, because we would not appreciate our car if we got like a Ferrari for our first car. You kind of have to start somewhere. And then like your dream car eventually becomes the thing you set your sights on. And so I think overnight success can actually be a detriment because then you sort of have this expectation that everything is just supposed to be so easy when really it's like nothing feels as good as visualizing something for so long and then seeing it actually come to fruition and, come to life. So
Yeah. 100% is when things go up quick, they can fall down quick.
Mm-hmm.
But when you build with a strong foundation and you just every day just getting a little bit better, that thing's really hard to crumble quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a little bit of an interesting question for you. I'm not sure if you've spoken about this in systems and kind of the framework you have, but a lot of our audience has a kind of recurring theme in improving interpersonal relationships and then specifically dating. So do you have anything that you use? It doesn't have to be personally if you're not comfortable talking about that, but when it comes to some of this mindfulness, this framework you've created in regards to up-leveling maybe the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and then also how to use some of these tools in calling in whatever it may be. Maybe it is that kind of life partner or even just improve kind of dating experiences in general.
Yeah, I love the topic of dating. It's a really interesting topic.
Yeah.
And I think something that deserves to like have intentional conversations these days.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, I think how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it always comes back down to vision is like, what is it that you're looking to create right now? Is it you want to go have a fun dating experience and explore a lot? Cool. Then you know what you're optimizing for. Is it you want a lifelong partner? All right, now we know what we're optimizing for. And I come from a heavy marketing background as well. And it's interesting too, is like when you know marketing, you can actually utilize that in a lot of different areas of life. And I look at dating as like, if you're a smart marketer, it's a very similar thing. It's like with business, it's about like identifying who is your ideal client and then just getting in front of your ideal client as much as you possibly can and offering them value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's the same thing with dating is like, okay, we have the vision. Okay. We want to, let's just say lifelong partner. And then now let's identify who is that ideal partner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And one of the most powerful strategies that I can recommend, and we talk about this in a lot of different things that we do, but it's this concept known as inversion thinking. So instead of thinking like, oh, who is my ideal client? Who is my ideal partner? It's who is my nightmare client? Who is my nightmare partner? And you start discovering, well, I don't want someone that smokes. I don't want someone that doesn't work out. I don't want somebody that doesn't have a relationship with God. Like you're finding all these different things. And then you can simply just flip it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, if they smoke, they don't smoke. If they don't work out, that they value fitness and they work on their body and their health. Right. And you find all these different things, then you just flip them. And now you have a much more clear picture because it's so much easier to figure out what we don't want than it is to know what we do want. And so once we figure out that ideal client or that ideal avatar, then it's like, okay, well, where does that person hang out?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's like, okay, if you're looking for a lifelong partner and you're going to the bars and the clubs, like, okay, I'm not saying that you can't find that person, but the probabilities are a little bit lower. Like the conversion rate, if we're talking marketing, the conversion rates are going to be lower, right? So start thinking about where's that, like for me, like, women that I'm attracted to that are focused on their body, their health, right? So it would make a lot of sense for me to go to yoga classes, go to cooking classes, different spots like that. And then we can also, I think, I haven't done the apps in, I mean, probably like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother conversation just for me personally, because I I just don't want to like attract someone that like in a convenient way. I would much rather like step into my masculine and see someone that I'm attracted to and go talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same note, like if you want to use a dating app, I would strongly recommend the best dating app, which is Instagram, because now that we've identified that ideal avatar, right? And then we like, okay, where does that person hang out? There's a lot of different places that you can go to. Like, again, coming back to, for me, and I've even done this a little bit, but like, okay, yoga classes would be a good place to meet people. I can go find like all the different yoga, what do you call it? Yoga,
Studios or
studios, and I
uh-huh.
can go look at all of them, and then I can see people and go engage in them, or I can,
Mm-hmm.
so it's that all, it's just simple, right? It just ideal, figure out who your ideal avatar is, go get around them as much as possible, and
Mm-hmm.
have good conversations, know who you are, which comes back to like those, removing those subconscious blocks,
Mm-hmm.
getting very clear on who you are, what you're all about, and then you're, from an energetic standpoint, you're going to attract that type of person in. But it all comes down to the self and having the woo down, but then having a do strategy to it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is often overcomplicated, and then there are so many aspects at play that even cause extra layers and nuance to it. But as you said, if you're going to the place that doesn't fit that, say, like ICP exercise, if you've done that, you figured out who that ideal person is, and then you're constantly going to places that that person wouldn't be, you can't be surprised that you're not aligning with that caliber of people. And so it's almost also kind of a double-edged sword in a good way, though, where if you're also aligning with yoga and cooking classes and those different things, you're improving yourself and you're exposing yourself to positive things, regardless of if you align with a partner or not. It's like, what are ways that you can also expand your circle and network, and also just engage in self-care? And again, like you said, going to some of those places that maybe are the norm or the habit that you have to break, like the bars late night or whatever, aren't really pouring into yourself. So
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that as well, just in case anybody is in this stage of their life, I had a really powerful conversation with a friend last night about this, because I'm just in a season where I'm not really dating. I'm definitely calling in my person, and I'm not willing to settle for someone that's not close to that. And I think there's something very, very profound about that, where it's like, I want to have the integrity to meet that person that I'm calling in, that's just the absolute most amazing woman. And I want to have the integrity to say, like, I did not settle for anybody. I was waiting for you. I was preparing myself for you.
Yeah.
Right. And I just want to have that integrity, because I know that the person I'm calling is absolutely incredible. And it was just a really powerful conversation I had with my friend about that. And I've just been on that wave. Is like, I'm just not settling. I'm not willing to do that anymore. I'd rather be alone than to settle for something that's not worth it, and then have my energy leaking. And then another thing to think about too, this is really interesting, but it's like, whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to another thing. So if you're saying yes to someone that's like, it's kind of convenient and kind of cool, you're like pushing that ideal partner away from an energetic standpoint.
Yeah. And exactly as you said, where, attention goes, energy flows, even if it is just convenient, or it feels like, well, I'm just kind of having this casual thing because what I really want to wait for is calling in this future partner. That actually is creating a major energy leak, where even if that perfect person came into your orbit, you wouldn't have the energy and the attention to be able to give them. And so how often do we allow, not even just in dating, but in professional situations, friendships, financially, we allow these little tiny energy leaks to kind of just take away and like maybe take up even 10, 20, 30% of real estate in our mind. And that's 10, 20, 30% that when those right situations fall into our path, we're then showing up automatically at 70%. And it's like, that to me, I'm not interested in. And it feels really nice in all aspects to kind of clear some of those energy leaks and cut things out. And I'm always amazed that the minute I create space, something comes in that I never could have imagined. And so sometimes that might be a friendship that is no longer serving, or a smaller situation, but that you just create this space for. And then I'm shocked that within days, weeks, you know, that space is filled. And I just realized it couldn't have been filled because my energy was going to the wrong things. So,
Yep.
yeah.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
yes and all that.
Yes, exactly. And exactly as you said, I mean, this right now, as the seasons are changing, I know you're in Arizona. I went to grad school there. And so it was like hotter than hell. We're dead. Like those were the seasons. Here in Idaho, we have all 4 seasons. And right now it's really, really changing into the fall. And I'm really being called to kind of hunker down, lean inward, process more, say no to some of the external things I'm maybe being invited to, and really use this season to just kind of turn over a new leaf, you know, pun intended there. But I think that, I don't know, I just feel like it's often really well timed, where even in this season, saying yes to something that sounds really fun means saying no to rest and recharging. And so it might not always be, it could be 2 great yeses, but figure out what it is that is the inverse of that and what you're saying no to kind of by default, you know?
And I know we're coming up on time, so I want to be respectful, but one thing that is really alive for me right now that I'd love to share is just really taking a process of strengthening my intuition. Because like, yeah, you could say like, oh, I'm going to say yes to this and I'm going to say no to that. Like, but like, what is your litmus test on saying yes and no? And so for me, like even the other night, I ended up going to this party and they're hanging out for a while. And I was just kind of questioning whether I wanted to stay there. You know, there's a lot of great people, but I was like, I also really value my sleep. And I was just wondering if staying longer was worth the lack of sleep. And instead of just thinking about that from a logical standpoint, I just sat there with myself and I was praying a little bit to God, but then I was also asking like, is this a yes? And I noticed how my body felt. And I noticed that my heart kind of expanded when I was like, is this a yes? And then I asked the question, is this a no? And I didn't feel that same expansion in my heart. And so then I ended up staying, and I had an incredible night, met some incredible people. And like, I definitely would have missed out on things that I would have not loved to miss out on if I did leave. And so whether that ended up being a positive that I stayed or not, I'm recognizing how yeses and nos feel in my body, and then moving forward based on like the feeling and then what ended up happening. Now I have a little bit more of an experience of like, what is a yes and what is a no? And the stronger I get that, then I'll just continue to come back and say, is this a yes? And then I can trust that feeling a lot more as I move forward. And then eventually I'll get to this point where I can do it very quickly, and I'll just know everything that's a yes and a no for what's for me in that moment.
Yeah. I really love that. I appreciate you sharing that. I haven't actually shared with this audience this exercise that I've done, but it's so synonymous with your experience, is that sometimes when we just try to apply intuition to our everyday life, it's really easy to get intellectualizing or cerebral about it and kind of struggle with where we hold our yeses and our nos. And so kind of a fun, silly exercise I was taught a long time ago that I still redo just to see where I feel it in my body is I'll either say out loud or in my head something that I know definitely to be true. So maybe it's like, I love chocolate. Okay, so that's just a yes, I love chocolate. So like, where do I feel that? Oftentimes it's like in my stomach, it's kind of butterflies and sort of like a happy feeling. And then I'll say something that is certainly not true. So it'll be like, the sky is green, or, you know, something that is just a no. And I know objectively, like, my house is pink. It's not pink. So then I will feel in my body, and that's often in my chest. It'll just be like a little bit tight. And so when I practice that on things that I know are yeses and I know are nos, then when I face situations moving forward and I ask exactly that, it's just tuning in and figuring out where I have that feeling and then moving forward with it. And we talk a lot, you know, on this podcast and within my audience about the power of intuition, especially guiding our decisions. And the more we're allowing of ourselves to follow that, the stronger, as you said, it becomes. And we almost don't even then have to pause. We're able just to be directed and guided by it a lot quicker. So yeah, I love that example. And I think it's really applicable just to anyone listening to start using that a little bit more, rather than all the noise around you telling you what's a yes and what's a no and pulling you in every direction. So
That's such a valuable point, and I love that. I just want to double click on that because in the beginning, it especially can be a bit confusing. I know it was for me, like, well, what actually is a yes? Like, how do I know it's a yes? And it's really powerful to ask yourself things that your body knows is a yes. What's my name? What color is the sky? Like,
Right.
test a bunch of things, and then just like really tap in and tune into like how it makes you feel after you say those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a constant progression. It's like you're Bambi right now. You got these scrawny, squiggly legs, and then eventually they'll get stronger and stronger, and then you'll be able to run.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, before we close, I would love to hear your personal version of Red Nail Energy, if you have one for us.
That would be so hilarious.
Get the red nails out. There you go.
Pull up my red nails. That would be great. So
Love
red
it.
nail energy is like that confident, that highest version of yourself type energy, right?
Yep.
Again, it comes back to it all throughout the podcast, but it's just really getting clear on like who you're wanting to become. And it's like, yes, it's what's the life that you want to create, but who's the person that actually goes out there and creates that life? So it's continuing to get clear on that person. And that's more of like, again, more of a woo answer, but I think it's really the foundation to everything. And then one thing that we actually haven't even discussed too much, that has been absolutely imperative for me in my life and allowed me to tap into my red nail energy, is courage, is having the courage to step out and do the things that you're scared to do. Whether that's speaking, whether that's going and talking to someone you find attractive, or skydiving, or whatever it is. I truly believe that the more that we can tap into courage, the more powerful we become. And I'll back that up by a little bit of science.
I already know what you're going to say, and I'm so excited. I love this book, and having this be like the middle line between the high and low vibration. But tell listeners, sorry, I just like nerded out because I got so excited.
I love it. I'm glad you're on that vibe. I was going to see if they had I don't think they actually have the.
They do, like the chart.
Really?
I want to say it might be kind of early in the book, and it shows all the different emotions or
actually. Yeah, it does. There's no chart, but it tells you all of them.
Yeah, it's like the list.
So to answer your question here, for anybody that doesn't know, so this is Letting Go by Dr. David R. Hawkins. And he's got this thing called the scale of consciousness. And so it's basically showing you all the emotions and the frequency that aligns with those emotions. And so it talks about like shame, guilt, fear, apathy. Those are all down at the bottom. And then love, joy, gratitude. Those are the things that are at the top. And the interesting through line, as you mentioned, is that is courage. Because everything above courage is life-giving, everything below courage is life-taking. And so how many times, and I just pose this question, I have anybody listening just ask themselves of this, is like, when's a time that you had an experience where you were scared to do something, but then you did it? And how good did you feel after that? Like for me, it's speaking. It's also when I see someone attractive and I go actually talk to them, I'm like, wow, that just felt so good that I did it. No matter if I get shot down or whatever, it's like, that just felt good to do. Right. And the more that I tap into that, the better I feel. And then the better I feel, the better I do, the more aligned I am, the more confidence, the more courage I have, the more I just have that energy that people can pick up on. And that's that red
nails right there. Yeah, I love it.
So the more that you can tap into that, and we even talk about that coming back to our KPI sheet, is one of the other columns we have is our amps. And usually we'll set a goal of like, hey, I want to do like 5 things that like are my amps, that are my things that I want to step into courage. And so, and then again, setting goals like, okay, I did 5 this month. Do you want to do 6 next month or whatever it is? So, and that's just been really powerful for me, because I don't think you just receive confidence. I don't think you just receive red nail energy. I think you earn it.
Yeah. And you have to really embody it instead of it just being like a thing that happens. Yeah.
That's a great way to say it. I didn't want to say earn, but you start to embody it the more that you practice it.
For sure. And in that same book, I love the quick exercise you can do where if you find yourself in one of those life-taking emotions, maybe you're feeling really shameful about something or really guilty, to pause and to use your kind of inverse example, think about in your mind what the opposing emotion is about that. You don't have to get so nitpicky that you're like really pulling out the chart, but instead it's like, I feel really shameful right now. And then what would, in my mind, the opposite of that would be proud and like really proud of myself. Even if just for 5 seconds you sit there and, as you said, think about a situation where you felt really proud and feel that again, it can start to let you live on that life-giving plane so much more, and just get yourself out of some of those emotions that are not serving you and causing so many negative spirals within our health and within our relationships. And so it's small, tangible things that are all, again, within our mind and pausing to have awareness to, but are so incredible when we let ourselves do them.
Yeah, it's just massive awareness on like where you're at, what's the opposing emotion, how do you tap into that more. And then I would definitely love to add this too, is just because, again, we're starting to realize some new messaging and we're helping people with their personal brands. And the reason why is because, like, when you operate and you build an authentic personal brand, it's such a powerful personal development experience. And I made a post today and it was talking about that because I was having a conversation, we recorded it with a friend. And I was like, I've gotten to learn so much about myself. And, you know, if it's, that could also be one of your amps too. It's not necessarily for me anymore because I love creating content. And there's no, like, it doesn't take any courage for me at this point. I just love doing it. But there was a point in time when that wasn't the case. But the more and it's, again, I come back to, it's not just online and it's offline too. So like, I consider, you know, building my brand was throwing events and going to speak. Like, that's part of building who I am. And the more that I step out into courage and go out there and create, because I think that's really what it is. I go out and create. I create a speech. I go out and create an experience. I go out and create some video content. You know, you're creating. And the more that you tap into that, the more you learn about yourself. Even like for right here, for an example, you know, I've done a podcast for the last like 3 years, and that's been one of the most powerful things for my brand and learning who I am, because I learned so much through conversation. Even in this conversation, I'm learning how to articulate the things that I want to share more. And I'm, you know, putting myself out there and getting to hear your perspective about things. And I'm just like, it's such an amazing process to like really go out there and create your brand and say yes to the things that you're maybe a little bit nervous to do, but you get to learn so much about yourself through the process. You know, if people don't necessarily want to create content, like that's fine. You don't feel like that's who you are. But if there's any ounce of you that's not doing it because you're somewhat scared to do it, I would encourage you to lean into that, because you'll learn so much through the process. And I just, like, for me personally, it's been a beautiful journey over the last like 10 years of creating content and building a brand that I never would have had a lot of the relationships. I never would have had a lot of the experiences. I never would have had like the business and friendships if it wasn't for me, like, actually going out there and creating.
Yes, retweet. I love that. I think it's, even if it's not content, every single person listening right now has something their heart is being called and pulled to do that they're not doing. Like, because that's the thing, is even when you're doing, your life is on fire and everything is magnetic, there are still things you're continuously called to do. Thank goodness. We don't ever just reach an end point. And so, you know, everyone listening, whatever that thing is, when I say that, something flutters into everyone's mind and they know what it is. It's just a matter of having the courage to step above that line and actually do it. And so I think that's a great message to end on, and, you know, send everyone off with that, whatever that thing is, like, you are the only thing in your way. And so just be brave enough and have the courage to step above the line, and you will surprise yourself. And regardless of if it's marketing and content creation, and in that way, we all are building our own personal brand. And what a blessing and how beautiful to be able to every single day get to know yourself a little better and be a little more clear on that, and hold your head a little higher. And that's red now energy for me, is walking into every room, and it doesn't matter who's in the room. I know who I am. And that's so powerful, versus I am everyone in every room and I'm a chameleon and I can just become what they need me to be, which was people pleasing patterns I've had in the past. And now I'm like, I can walk into a room and everyone's nails are black and mine are going to be red, and I don't care. I know who I am, you know. And obviously that's a silly example, but it goes so far beyond that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, tell listeners where they can find you if they'd like to follow you. I'll link all this in the show notes, as well as the book that you brought up, Letting Go, if anyone wants to reference that. But if anyone would like to follow or work with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you asking. And again, I appreciate you having me on. This has been a really cool conversation. So yeah, one other resource I was going to recommend on top of Letting Go is A Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Have you read that one?
I haven't.
It's like coming back to the conversation around creation and just creators. Like it'll give it a new perspective to what that really means. Because you're right, it's not just about like marketing and building your online brand and whatnot. It's like everyone is creating at all times, and when you take that perspective, like life is creation. It's literally what's happening.
Great.
But yeah, if you guys want to plug in with me, we've got several different resources. Instagram is a platform that I'm very active on. I have my YouTube channel as well that I record a lot of long form content on. Sometimes they're like 30-40 minute videos, and I go deep on some really cool concepts, especially like relationship building, brand building, like the energetics, visualization, subconscious blocks. And then another really powerful place that we are building our communities on School. It's SKOOL. Right now it's called Magnetic Manifesting.
Okay.
And then we also do our live podcast events here in Scottsdale. So we have our next one on November 8th. You can go to justgrowpodcast.com. And then if you want to learn more about the Woo and Do formula, we have another little video that I created. It's justgrowvisions.com/woo do. So I'll get you all the links there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Well, any last words? I always like to just end if there's anything intuitive that pops into your mind you think a listener might need to hear. And otherwise, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really insightful and exciting.
Yeah, I would love to just see everyone treat others the way they want to be treated. That was something that my mom shared with me at a very early age, and some people may think that sounds a little cheesy, but like I honestly believe that it's one of the biggest life hacks. Like if you can really understand and have empathy for other people, it's the basis of building a brand, right? You're treating others. Like another way to describe brand is it's like, what are people saying about you when you're not there? And it feels really good to know that like I got a lot of amazing people in my life that are speaking very highly about me when I'm not around, and just sharing like how they see me. Like that's such a gift, and like to give that gift to other people as well. I think this world is in a very interesting place where people are like mad at each other for no good reason, and it's just like we want to see change. Like be the change. So
absolutely. And how do we change the world? With one person at a time? That's starting with ourselves. But also, I love that. Treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And then you're living in integrity, and the way people speak about you is going to be something you're proud of when you hear what's being said. So I love that. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Red Nail Energy listeners, you are loved and so seen. Go out into the world, do the hard thing, be courageous, and treat people with kindness along the way. We will catch you on the next episode. Thanks, Niko.
thank you.